The Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great in the mid-6th century BC, was the first Persian empire, and is renowned for its monumental architecture, advanced bureaucracy, and the creation of the royal road for efficient communication across its vast territories. The Achaemenids were notable for their tolerance and respect for the diverse cultures that were within their empire, allowing conquered peoples to maintain their own customs and beliefs. It was this approach that fostered a sense of unity and relative stability throughout the empire, at least in the good times. Regardless, their contributions to art, governance, and engineering left a lasting legacy that influenced subsequent empires in the region and overall laid a foundation to the acts of Persian culture that persisted long after the empire's fall to Alexander the Great. Hi, how are you? And welcome to the channel. If you're coming back, it's great to have you with me again. And if you're new here, well, you're in the right place. That is, if you want to relax and learn something new. Well, if you'd like to support the channel, as always, links to Patreon are in the description. And to help YouTube push my video out to more people, it's probably a good idea to click that like button. Did you do it? Thanks in advance. And now, without any further ado, let's talk about the culture and some of the more specific aspects of the Achaemenid culture that was not covered in my chronological video. Indeed, that's what you get when you have a strictly chronological form. Some things are talked about in more detail than others. We've talked about in our Achaemenids video the rulers and the wars, the rise and fall. But what happened in between? What about the day-to-day life of someone in the Achaemenid Empire? Well, that's what it's all about today. So, in no particular order, I'm going to go through some cultural aspects of what it would have been like to be in the first Persian Empire. Get relaxed. Let's start. The Achaemenid Empire, known for its expansive governance and cultural achievements, significantly shaped the structures of subsequent empires across Asia and the Middle East. Its methodologies in administration were highly influential and set precedents that were emulated even by the Greeks and the Romans. This Persian model was notably pivotal for the Abbasid Caliphate of later times, and heralded in the Islamic Golden Age, with its epicenter right back in the heartland of Mesopotamia, close to ancient Babylon. The Abbasids drew heavily from Persian aristocracy for support, incorporating Persian linguistic, architectural, and cultural elements into Islamic society. In fact, a lot of the things that you see in Islamic art are borrowed from the earlier Persian empires. The Achaemenid legacy, as great as it is also recognized for its role as being a key player in the Greco-Persian Wars, and its benevolent act of emancipating Jewish exiles in Babylon. Well, this indicates its broad cultural and social impact, along with, of course, religious implications. Take a look in the Old Testament. You'll find the Achaemenids there too. The exchange between Achaemenid Persia and the Athenian Greeks highlights another significant aspect of cultural reciprocity. Moreover, the empire contributed to the dissemination of the great philosophy and religion, Zoroastrianism. Still around today, by the way. It's a religion that has deeply influenced the cultural and historical identity of Iran. It might surprise you that in modern-day Iran there are still many Zoroastrians who are free to practice their religion as they see fit. They even have their own temples, fire temples to be specific, dotted all over Iran, especially in Tehran and Isfahan. Now, many historians have highlighted the lasting influence of Achaemenid governance practices on Abbasid society and beyond, characterizing it as a reintegration of Achaemenid systems within Islamic governance. So, let's talk about that for a moment. The Persianate culture, through the Abbasid period carried forward by Turkic origin empires, for example, the Seljuk Turks, Ottomans, Safavid, and even the Mughal empires, have left their own great mark on the vast region, extending Iranian civilization to the fringes of Europe and even throughout Southeast Asia. It's of particular note that the second advent of Islam, through Iranian Islam, which played a dominant role in shaping the Islamic world and spreading Persianate culture, establishing it as a cornerstone of Islamic civilization across Central Asia, Turkey, and even India. The traditions of the Achaemenid dynasty, amalgamated together to set a precedent in the ancient world for its unique model of governance, which allowed for the integration of diverse cultures, languages, and traditions within a single system. This empire, likened to the vast realms of Germany and the dominions under Napoleon, was not just a collection of conquered lands, but it became a sophisticated federation of states, each with its own distinct identity and autonomy. Now, let's be fair. The central authority did have to enforce its own general laws across the empire. But it did, credit where it's due, preserve and, in some cases, foster the individual characteristics of each nation, from their legal systems all the way up to their social customs, regardless of what the Persian upper classes thought of them. Now, one thing we may say, and once again credit where it's due, my aforementioned fire temples in modern-day Iran, the tolerance of allowing these practices to continue are something that it is an extension of the older Achaemenid tolerance culture. Indeed, it's rather surprising to hear that Iran is allowing what definitely looks from the outside to be a pagan religion to operate so freely within its country. But then again, if we want to ask what the situation is, perhaps we should ask the Iranians themselves, as they would probably know a lot more than our Western media organizations would like to tell us. Now, this method of rule, this blanket tolerance, was emblematic of the empire's ethos, comparable to light that simultaneously illuminates and gives life, allowing each subject nation to flourish under their own terms, of course beneath the benevolent oversight of the Persian kings. And such an approach not only maintained peace and order across the vast distances in the empire, but it also enriched a group of empire that was most of a mosaic of cultures, languages, and traditions. All in all, a vibrant and dynamic civilization that does not get the credit it deserves. The Achaemenid era, in particular, certainly marked a golden age of Persian influence, setting its cultural, artistic, religious, and administrative innovations far beyond its own borders, eastward and westward. The achievements in creating an efficient administrative system, a network of roads, and a sense of security, prosperity, and even belonging for its own people were something unparalleled and not seen, or at least attempted to be replicated, until the height of the Roman Empire. Now, with the introduction out of the way, let's talk a little more about the culture of the Achaemenids. First, let's take a look at the language and writing. For if we want to understand how our people were, we should perhaps try and hear it in their own tongue. Of course, I'm not going to be speaking any Achaemenid language, so I'm sorry if you're looking forward to that. But we will talk a little bit about their script and their language in general. Now, during Cyrus II and Darius I's rule, with the political center in Susa, Elamite was actually predominant as the chancellery's language, and we know this by the administrative documents from the Persepolis, fortification and treasury, and there's plenty of them. Of course, it's very easy to preserve cuneiform records because they were all written on clay tablets, so we're still pulling them out of the ground. These documents, though, in particular, shed light on the empire's operational aspects, and it suggests that while Elamite was pivotal in Susa, for example, one of the largest cities, its application as a governmental standard across the empire was not universal. Think about how Latin was the standard in the early church days and within administration for government, same as Greek in certain parts, but people still spoke their own languages. So, in many inscriptions, Elamite translations actually sat next to the Old Persian and Akkadian versions, which indicate its secondary role. And as a matter of fact, as far as we know now through the records we've found, post 458 BC, the use of Elamite pretty much fades away. You just don't see it anymore. Now, the empire's expansion into Mesopotamia, that's the land between the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, brought Aramaic to the forefront as the medium for interregional written communication, addressing the linguistic diversity within the empire's territories. The adoption of official Aramaic, as it was called, or imperial Aramaic, played another critical role in the Achaemenids' ability to maintain cohesion across their expansive realm. Although the exact status as Aramaic as an official language, well, that's still up for debate. All in all, Aramaic's influence did persist long after the empire's decline. Spoiler alert, I know. But its script and vocabulary was foundational to the Pahlavi writing system of later times. Now, Old Persian, featured on certain seals and artistic artifacts, is predominantly seen in western Iran's Achaemenid inscriptions, indicating its usage in that region. Nonetheless, by Artaxerxes II's era, the imperfect grammar and orthography in inscriptions suggest scribes were somewhat distanced from the language, relying heavily on older texts for reproductions. Additionally, Greek actually served as a significant bureaucratic tool within the Achaemenid administration, highlighting its widespread use despite the empire's extensive Greek interactions and conquests. Remarkably, despite all of these interactions, old Iranian sources do not reflect Greek linguistic influence. But, there is evidence that we've found of Greeks that were living and working in Iran, or Persia, sure. And they participated in projects, for example, Darius's palace at Susa is one example I can think of off the top of my head, and they left behind a lot of Greek inscriptions and documents to prove this. So there is that. Now, moving on from written language, let's get into some of the more day-to-day culture. Get out of the office, so as it seems. And we'll start with a little bit on religion. I mean, it's a cultural cornerstone, right? So let's start from there. Worship of Mithra was widespread across the Achaemenid Empire. His temples and symbols were ubiquitous, influencing personal names and dedications of numerous festivals to him, which were, of course, big events that everybody showed up to. This devotion shows the profound integration of that Mithraic worship within the general fabric of society, influencing all of those little parts. Now, the Achaemenid Empire was indeed, as aforementioned, noted for its religious tolerance, an attribute considered very exceptional for its time. And this tolerance was exemplified by Cyrus the Great's release of the Jewish people from Babylonian captivity, allowing them to simply return home, and he even facilitated the restoration of their sacred sites. So Cyrus the Great is seen as a little bit of a saint to the Jewish people. But it was Zoroastrianism. That was the big one. Its expansion into southwestern Iran during this era of the Achaemenid Empire marked a massive cultural development, with the religion being embraced by even the ruling class, all the way down to the humble farmer. And it effectively is synonymous with this Persian identity. The formalization of the traditional Iranian pantheon, alongside the introduction of Zoroastrian free will concepts, underscored the religion's influence. Now, if you want to learn more about that, I do have a full video on Zoroastrianism, and I talked a little bit about it in my general video on the Achaemenid Empire. So, take your pick. Now, Herodotus, observing during Artaxerxes and Darius II's reign, highlighted the Persians' very distinct religious practices, which included sacrifices to natural elements without the use of idols, altars, or even temples. And all of this leads us to the conclusion that their gods were rather transcendent in nature and omnipresent. You didn't just have to show up to the temple to see the god. They were everywhere. This practice, of course, diverged from Greek customs, which that's a long word, anthropomorphized deities. Excuse me. Of course, it's all a little difficult for the Greeks to understand, but they got their head around it eventually. Now, the latter adoption of Urania worship from Arabian and Assyrian cultures indicated another openness to religious influences, and the syncretic nature of Persian religious practices in general. Now, despite Herodotus's account indicating an absence of divine images, Berosus, writing later, credits Artaxerxes II with introducing cult statues across the empire. And this suggests another evolution, perhaps not in the religion itself as the gods were omnipresent, but there was a change in the expression, a change in the art that surrounded religion. And dare I say that art coming out of religion is probably the best looking art. But, of course, everything is subjective. But of course, couldn't all be religious ceremony, right? The Persians enjoyed a bit of a party as well, and quite often. Now, as noted by Herodotus, the Persians celebrated significant banquets for birthdays that concluded reportedly with numerous desserts, a custom that differed from the Greek dining traditions, of course. Additionally, Herodotus recorded that Persians consumed abundant amounts of wine, copious even, and uniquely incorporated it into their decision-making process thusly. They would discuss vital matters while completely intoxicated, and then, the following day, when they were in somewhat a better mental state, they would determine the viability of the decisions that are made. Now, let's talk about the role of women and where they fit into this. After all, they're half the population. In the Achaemenid Empire, the societal status and roles of women, of course, varied across the different cultures and regions, which is just another way of emphasizing this vast diversity of the empire. There wasn't a single Achaemenid people. Therefore, everyone's positions are going to be different. Now, this portrayal of Persian women, particularly those from Persia proper, has often been shaped by a lot of biblical and mythological references, as well as descriptions from ancient Greek sources, which may or may not fully capture the complexities and nuances of their lives. However, the archaeological Persepolis fortification tablets offer a more direct glimpse into the lives of women connected to the royal court in Persepolis, ranging from royal figures all the way down to female laborers. Within the Persian court, there was a clear hierarchy among the royal women, and this hierarchy, of course, placed the king's mother at the pinnacle. Not a new idea, followed in descending order by the queen, the king's daughters, his concubines, and finally the other royal women of the household. Marriages for the king typically involved a female from the royal family or a noble woman closely related to a satrap or another prominent Persian figure. While marriages between relatives were permitted, there isn't much substantial evidence supporting the practice of close familial marriages, for example, between full siblings, brother and sister. Now, contrary to the Greek accounts depicting the king surrounded by hundreds of concubines in a secluded harem, archaeological findings do not corroborate the existence of a harem, or even the practice at all of isolating women from male company at the Persian court. In fact, what we do know is that royal women not only shared meals with the king, but they also accompanied him on travels, and even possibly participated in royal hunts and banquets. The queen, in particular, is known to have held her own audiences, and managed her personal affairs independently. Of course, that suggests a level of autonomy and public presence that isn't really associated with the seclusion implied by the concept of a harem. So I think that we can perhaps chalk that up to a bit of imagination on Herodotus's part, as he's often keen to do. Now, the women in the Achaemenid Empire, especially those of royal and aristocratic status, were educated in skills such as archery and horsemanship, indicating that they were really not confined to these private spaces. These women often managed vast estates, and even their own businesses, employing numerous servants and professionals, and appeared in public alongside their husbands. This visibility often extended to social events like hunting expeditions and feasts, where the presence of women was customary until certain points in the festivals where it was the boys' time. Now, while no woman, that we know of at least, ever assumed the role of monarch or regent in the Achaemenid Empire, queens consort like Atossa and Parysatis wielded significant influence over state affairs. Now, the reason why I say that we know of is because a lot of the times when we look at Egyptian and other Bronze Age cultures, when there was a ruler that people didn't like, they would simply do their best to erase them from the pages of history. So, perhaps there may have been, but it seems terribly unlikely. Well, the formal administration and religious services do appear to have excluded women entirely from the official positions. Nevertheless, archaeological evidence from Persepolis reveals that some women were actively employed as free laborers working side by side with men. Some even led their own work gangs and received higher wages than their male counterparts. Although generally, 99% of the cases, women's wages were lower, unless they were exceptionally skilled craft workers, and even in that case, it was most likely then just equal pay to their male counterparts. Now, what about art and architecture? Well, there's plenty of that left over. It was emblematic of an empire that spanned 3 continents, and it stands out for its synthesis of diverse cultural elements amalgamated into a distinctive Persian ethos. The empire's builders and artisans drew from a broad palette that included Median, Assyrian, and even Asiatic Greek influences, all molding together into something that was uniquely and recognizably Persian. This rather eclectic approach is evident across the vast territories that were once under Achaemenid sway, all the way from the Mediterranean, reaching to the Indus River. It manifests in the monumental stone structures and paradisiacal gardens segmented by flowing water. Of course, the Achaemenids were certainly known for their ambitious architectural projects, which included their sprawling cities, majestic temples and palaces, and of course solemn mausoleums, like the tomb of Cyrus the Great. The essence of their architectural innovation lay not just in the scale and grandeur, but in the harmonious integration of varied elements that still allowed for a Persian identity to shine through. Achaemenid art, likewise, demonstrated its own profound capacity for integration and innovation. It's seen in the intricate frieze reliefs, the exquisite metalwork of items like the Oxus treasure, the ornate decoration of palaces, the use of glazed brick masonry, and the perfection of crafts such as carpentry and masonry itself. Persian art was categorized by its ability to absorb and transform artistic styles and techniques from across the empire's vast territory, and really make something from all the best parts of them. Definitely unique. Of course, all of this amalgamates in the Palace of Persepolis, which stands out as that quintessential testament to Achaemenid architectural and artistic achievement. Its grandeur and detailed craftsmanship underscore the empire's architectural ambition, along with its artistic finesse. Darius I's account of constructing his palace at Susa reveals the global scale of resources and craftsmanship that went into the Achaemenid projects. Materials and artisans were sourced from across the wide ranges of the empire. Timbers from Gandhara and Carmania, gold from Bactria and Sardis, precious stones like lapis lazuli and carnelian from Sogdiana, silver and ebony from Egypt, turquoise from Chorosmia, and decorations from Ionia, with ivory sourced from Ethiopia, Sind, and Arachosia. The workforce, well, they were just as diverse as the materials, with stone cutters coming all the way from Ionia and Sardis, goldsmiths coming from Media and Egypt, and woodworkers from Sardinian and Egypt, Babylonians for brickwork, and Medes and Egyptians for all those little wall adornments that just made it that extra bit special. That little mint leaf on the side, the sprinkle of basil on top of the spaghetti. Okay, stop being silly. Now, the tradition of monumental tomb construction, that was another significant aspect of Achaemenid architectural practice, rather, excuse me. And it reflects both the grandeur but also personalized aspects of imperial ideology. The most iconic of these sepulchral monuments are found at Nash el-Rustam, an ancient necropolis, which is located roughly 12 kilometers northwest of the ceremonial capital, Persepolis. The site is renowned for hosting the rock-cut tombs of 4 Achaemenid sovereigns, that being Darius I, Xerxes I, Artaxerxes I, and Darius II. Each tomb carved into the face of a limestone cliff stands as an example to the might, piety, and enduring legacy of the kings intended leave behind, and a legacy left behind they certainly did. Now, beyond Nash-e-Rustam, other Achaemenid monarchs chose somewhat different locations for their resting places, demonstrating a diversity in burial practices within the dynasty. Wasn't like in Egypt how everyone was just crammed into the Valley of the Kings, depending on the dynasty, of course. Notably, Artaxerxes II and Artaxerxes III commissioned their tombs adjacent to Persepolis, closer to the empire's spring capital. These tombs, while following the architectural tradition of their predecessors, signify a fairly obvious continuation, but also an evolution of the royal sepulchral tradition, with each monarch making a personal mark through their choice of location and even design. Which brings us to the very notable tomb of Cyrus the Great, that founder of the Achaemenid Empire, which occupies a unique place within the Persian necropolis tradition. Located in Passagarde, Cyrus's tomb is distinguished by its simplicity and solemnity. At least, it certainly does in contrast to those elaborate rock-carved facades of Nasht el-Rustam. Now this monument, you may have seen it before. It's actually recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Yeah, you can go there. And it not only marks the resting place of the empire's founder, but it also symbolizes the inception of the Achaemenid architectural and cultural legacy. It's through these diverse burial sites that the Achaemenid rulers sought to immortalize their reigns and ideologies. Now, a little bit on Cyrus the Great, because if you want to understand Achaemenid culture, you better understand Cyrus the Great. The foundation of the empire by Cyrus marked the beginning of a new era in the Near East. His establishment of a multi-state empire governed from the four major capitals of Passagarde, Babylon, Susa, and Ecbatana was a testament to the empire's vastness and diversity. This innovative system of governance allowed for the integration of various cultures and regions into a broad, cohesive imperial structure, while also granting a degree of regional autonomy through the satrapy system. Each satrapy served as an administrative unit, typically organized and based on geographical boundaries, and was overseen by its own satrap, or governor. Now this structure was complemented by a general who oversaw military recruitment and maintained order, and also a state secretary who was responsible for keeping official records. These positions created a direct line of communication and accountability to both the satrap and the central government, ensuring efficient administration and control across the empire's extensive territory. The military and administrative innovations of Cyrus were instrumental in the empire's expansion and consolidation, especially the notable creation of the Immortals. You may have heard of them, an elite unit of 10,000 highly trained soldiers. This exemplified the empire's military and strategic capabilities. And don't believe the movies. They were actually a lot better at fighting than... Is it Frank Hubert who did the 300 film? I can't quite recall. Either way, they were a lot better than the comic books will tell you. Additionally, the establishment of an extensive postal system. That's right, the post system. Based on a network of relay stations known as Chapar Khaneh, facilitated rapid and reliable communication. The discovery of the Persepolis administrative archives in the 1930s provided unprecedented insights into Achaemenid administrative and governmental systems. With a smaller portion in Aramaic and a singular tablet identified written in Old Persian, shed light on the inner workings of the Achaemenid administration. The presence of numerous seals and seal impressions among these documents shows the bureaucratic process and data flow within Persepolis, and it gives us a pretty good glimpse into the daily management of the empire's affairs over a period of around 50 consecutive years from 509 to 457 BC. The introduction of the Persian darik, a gold coin, alongside its silver counterpart of lesser value, the siglos, by Darius I, marked a significant milestone in the economic history of the Achaemenid Persians, and, frankly, the world. This bimetallic monetary standard, a pioneering concept at the time, laid the foundation for economic systems that would persist well into the modern era. Darius's reign was characterized by far-reaching economic reforms, including the establishment of a standardized coinage system that facilitated trade and economic integration within the vast empire. The Daric, in particular, became a symbol of Persian wealth and economic power, playing a critical role in the empire's commercial activities. Darius had also revolutionized the empire's economic structure through the implementation of a regulated and sustainable tax system. I'm sure that made him popular. This system was meticulously designed to reflect the economic potential and productivity of each satrapy, ensuring a fair and balanced contribution from each region. The tax assessments varied significantly, with Babylon, for instance, being required to contribute a substantial amount in both silver talents and provision for the army. India's tribute highlighted its renown for gold, while Egypt, with its abundant crops, was tasked with becoming the granary of the empire, contributing both grain and silver. So really, it wasn't that bad. I mean, if you had an abundance of a certain thing in your lands, well, why not use your tax that thing to pay your taxes, rather? It wasn't just give us money. It was basically give us what you can. But then again, if you didn't give enough, perhaps the taxman would come to your door. While the taxation on subject peoples was not merely a means of filling the empire's coffers, but it was also a method of integrating the diverse regions under Persian rule through a single, unified economic policy. The evidence suggests that the empire also regulated the slave trade. Well, unfortunately, they had that as well. So they imposed taxes on private slave sales, indicating another advanced level of administrative control and an early form of sales tax. Now, beyond the economic reforms, and just before we finish up, Darius's reign was notable for the codification of the data, a comprehensive legal system that laid the groundwork for future Iranian laws, reflecting the emperor's commitment to justice and order throughout his domain. Moreover, the construction of Persepolis as the new ceremonial capital embodied the empire's glory and sophistication, serving as just one more testament to why Persia is an unforgettable empire. Well, thank you very much for listening today, and I must apologize because I perhaps have been doing too many videos and my voice is going a little bit hoarse. There's only so many butter menthols that I can eat, and so many cups of Earl Grey that I can drink. But I'm doing my best for you. I would like to thank my patrons. That would be Jeffrey, Stark Factory, and JC. 3 Chads, indeed. If you would like to support the channel, head on over to the Patreon. All the links are in the description. Otherwise, a like and comment and subscribe. You know what to do if you feel so inclined. Thank you again for listening. Rest well. I'm going to take a little break. Good night, everyone. Look after each other.